Okay.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And we are so excited to go live. We have many people already who have logged on. Thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to be a part of this webinar. We are going to be talking about 4 expert strategies to managing difficult relationships. And we know that this time that we spend together is going to be extremely useful, is going to add a lot of value and probably a completely new dimension to the way you're looking at relationships in your life. And that's the whole idea. So thank you once again for taking time to join the webinar. Shashank and I are going to be facilitating this time for you. Both of us are going to add value, our own experiences, as well as share some really wonderful world-class ideas and concepts with you. There are quite a few people who know us already, and there are some who are completely new. So we'll take a minute to quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Sneha Shah. I have a double majors in psychology. Both Shashank and I have a company by the name of ISRA. It's ISRA. The meaning of ISRA is journey in Hebrew. So for people who understand Hindi, it's Israha, which means this path. It's our baby, it's our passion. We founded ISRA 13 years ago. And while I have a background in psychology, Shashank is an engineer. So all of the technology that you see today is completely managed by him because I understand nothing of it. If I wanted to, I could, but I like to just, not really get into that part at all. So that's where our partnership really works wonderfully. He will tell you a little bit more about himself. And
I'm an engineer by education. I did my MBA, which is Masters in Business Administration. And I realized that my passion lied in working with people. It was in working with people, understanding why are they the way they are. And of course, technology beautifully adds a dimension to this work right now. Sneha and I started this company 13 years ago. And it's been a beautiful journey so far because we've been fortunate enough to offer workshops in 10 countries across the world. We've traveled the length and breadth of India. We work with 50 companies, which are top multinationals, and we do work with them on a regular basis. And we've also worked with people from almost 40 different nationalities.
so, what work we do is that we offer a lot of workshops and core transformation systems that really help people to change the way they are leading their lives, the way they are experiencing themselves, as well as people around them. So whether be it their social circle, be it their family, or be it the organizations that they belong to. So this is what we do. Some couple of quick logistics information for you right now.
Yes, so I'm going to quickly take a moment to talk a little bit about technology. So for people who are joining us right at the bottom, especially for people who are joining us on Zoom, on the webinar, I also, Sneha and I were just playing around with this 5 minutes ago and we realized we could go live on Facebook. So I hope that's still happening because we did say yes. But nevertheless, for people who are joining us on Zoom, right at the bottom, you will see a Q&A option. That is a space where you can ask a question and we will get a notification that you've asked a question and we will be able to reply to that. And you will also see a chat box. The chat box generally we prefer using when we ask you a question and you would like to share some information or you would like to just say a quick hi to anybody. Feel free to write in there.
Absolutely. While we can see the attendees who are there on the webinar, you may not really get an idea of who else is on the webinar right now with you.
We cannot see you, we can just see your name.
Yes, absolutely. We can see your name. So with that, we would like to get started with what we are going to be talking about today. We'll also be doing some slide share here so that you get a visual. It's a very good time for you to grab a pen and a writing pad because there are some ideas and thoughts that you can get during our time of interaction, which you can probably reflect on a little bit later. So like we said, ISRA was founded about 13 years ago. And in our experience of working with different kinds of people in different countries, with different kind of backgrounds, different age groups, different levels of seniority, one thing that we have realized, which is common across all people, and that is the need to have fulfilling and meaningful relationships. So it's almost like relationships are the source of a lot of joy, a lot of purpose, a lot of meaning in our lives. You know, what's interesting is, which is what's coming up next for you, that as people, we need people. You know, this is the reality. So as individuals or as people who belong to a social system, we are not meant to live in isolation. We are the most happiest, we are the most fulfilled when we are able to experience those joyful relationships around us. That's what we want to come home to. So while we may be working really hard, what matters is how people in our life are really happy, and they are getting the best out of us and what we can offer to them. There is so much of meaning that comes in our life through our friendships and through our interaction with other people. So from the moment that we are born till the moment we die, our life is filled with relationships, and we are constantly interacting and connecting with people. Now, the interesting part is that not all relationships are of the same kind. There are some relationships which are extremely joyful, which add a lot of value to our lives, and they are very, very fulfilling. Whereas there could be some kinds of relationship which could be a source of drain for you, which could be difficult, which could be upsetting, which could be something that you really need to be managing on day-to-day basis. Over a period of time that we have met with so many different people, there is one question that I have always loved asking them. And the question is, how many people in this room have somebody in your life whom you find difficult to deal with? And you know what the answer has been? 100% of the times people have raised their hand.
We would also love you to comment on the chat box, just for us to know that you are able to connect with us, you are able to see us, you are able to hear us. Feel free to write to us on the chat box.
You know, so the question again is, how many of us have some kind of relationships in our life which are difficult, or we are dealing with difficult people in our lives? And remember here, we are not judging anyone. We are not trying to make people right or wrong, but it's the challenges that we face while we are dealing with those relationships. And there are some which we are dealing with on regular basis, sometimes on daily basis, and it creates huge amount of strain, and as we struggle to deal with them and manage them. So today's day hopefully is going to give you a lot of insight on how you can manage yourself as you are navigating through those relationships. Thank you. We have things coming up on the chat as you're answering, so this really helps us. Thank you so much. And the next thing that we will talk about is, why do we find relationships challenging? And I think this is the first question. So, you know, today's webinar is going to be divided into 4 parts. The first part that we are going to be talking about is, why do we find relationships difficult? What is it about them that some relationships become extremely challenging, whereas the others are not so challenging? So that's the first little insight, small little insight that we are going to look at. The second thing that we are going to be talking about is the type of relationships that we experience in our life. So our universe is filled with relationships. So what are those types of relationships that we share with people? The third part that we are going to be talking about, which is very, very important, which talks about the quality of those relationships in our life, which means that how are those relationships contributing to us or taking away from us? And the last part is going to be the 4 expert strategies that are going to allow you to navigate through those relationships. So remember, stay tuned till the end, till we get to the 4 expert strategies. So quickly, once again, why do we find relationships difficult? What are the types of relationships that we have in our life? Thirdly, what are the quality of those relationships? How is it adding value or taking away from us? And lastly, 4 expert strategies that will help us navigate through the seemingly difficult relationships in a much, much easier way. We have people who are writing and saying that they have challenging relationships with people, with their spouses, with people who are close to them. And it is one thing for all of us to know that these challenges exist everywhere. You are not alone. So everybody is finding some or the other relationship challenging in their lives. And sometimes, we tend to question ourselves, that is it about me? Is there something that I'm doing wrong? Sometimes we end up spending a lot of energy trying to find answers outside, but it may not necessarily be easy. So the idea is to let you know that you are not alone as you go through these various different challenging relationships in your life.
It brings us to the first part, which says, why do we find some relationships difficult? And this is something which I really love, and Sneha has beautifully put it in point form. The fact of the matter is that people are different. That brings in its own challenges. Sneha and I have been married for 2 years now, and my wife Sneha is a psychologist, and the fact is that she's done every possible psychological inventory on me. And both of us have realized that we are poles apart, completely different on every possible psychological inventory. So the fact is that people are different, whether it's your sibling with you, whether it's your spouse with you, or even if you look at both your parents, they are different as people.
Absolutely. So what does that mean? When people are different, what are we trying to say? Chances are you would say, of course, I knew it, that people are different. But the fact of the matter is that we don't really pay too much attention to it, which means that people are different in the way they feel, the way they think, and the way they react or behave in different situations. It means, what does that mean? So given the same situation, Shashank and I might feel totally differently. So while I may feel low and upset and triggered, Shashank might feel absolutely okay and strong enough or capable enough to be able to handle those situations. While I may experience the emotions of sadness, Shashank may experience dominantly the emotions of anger. So we may be totally different people who have different set of feelings, different set of ways in which we think about a situation and the way we behave or respond to those. The fact is that while people are different, it also means that there are different life experiences that we end up creating. So we all have different kinds of experiences, different expectations, different ways of being, and which is not necessarily very easy.
The beauty is that because our life experiences are different, the same stimulus or the same experience which happens in the outside world creates different thought processes, different feelings, and therefore different behaviors when we interact in the same environment. So something happens outside, Sneha and I will have a complete different reaction to it because our thought processes, our emotions, and our behavior to it is completely different.
Absolutely. So like we said, if you have challenges with your spouse, chances are that you've grown up in very, very different backgrounds. And the fact of the matter is that though you come together in a relationship, you may have totally different ways in which you feel, in which you think, and in which you behave. You may have different needs and you may have different expectations.
I'm going to pause a moment here and I'm going to talk about the word thinking, feeling, and behaving. A lot of times we use them interchangeably. So when we use the word think, we are talking about what's happening in the head, the stream of dialogue. So even right now, while you're listening to us, you probably have 1,000 other things going on in your head. When we talk about feel, we are talking about what happens here. So we are talking about one word, usually angry, hurt, sad, upset, irritated. That generally the word feel is described in one word. And when we talk about the word behave, we talk about the way the external people see us.
Absolutely. So we are different. And now here is what's the most important thing, that we tend to be most comfortable with people who are like us, isn't it? It's so easy that they understand us very easily. We have common ways in which we think and we feel. Sometimes we don't even need to say anything. We don't even need to explain, and the other person has completely got whatever it is that we have to say. So it's very, very comforting when we actually are with people who are like us, who intuitively understand us. But the fact of the matter is that there is a large proportion of people in the world who are very, very different from us. And those are the ones who end up throwing up challenges. So what happens is that when there are people who are different from us, we usually try to change them. And we try to get them to be a little bit more like us so that we are able to deal with them in a much better way. Haven't you done that? Yeah. So the fact is that we get triggered by some people who are different from us, while there is a lot more comfort with people who are like us. We cannot change people. You know, the minute I make this kind of statement, it's met with a lot of resistance and a lot of sense of helplessness. But this is the truth, that how much ever we try, we cannot change people. We may have spent a lifetime trying to change our parents just in a little bit small way, usually with a good intention. Or maybe try to change our siblings, our friends, our spouse, just a little bit. But the fact of the matter is that people change only when they decide to change. And often we have no control over it at all. And when we are not able to change people, when we are not able to influence it, when we are not able to fix situations, when we are not able to get them to see what we are trying to say, it invariably leads to a lot of strong feelings inside. We end up feeling angry, we end up feeling frustrated, helpless, and all of these emotions start to play within us. And when we are intensely overwhelmed with all of these emotions, these very relationships tend to start feeling very difficult. That's the loss of power that we feel in our capacity to be and influence those relationships. Now, this is important for us to see that the beginning point of all of this lies in the fact that people are different. And because of that, we tend to get triggered. And when we get triggered, we try to change people, but they don't change. And when they don't change, it leads to a lot of intense emotions and loss of power. That is what the definition of difficult relationships is all about. We would be happy for you to share anything that may come up for you, either in your question answer and in the sharing that you have. So again, we have people who are talking about how we agree that we are different and how those differences create a lot of triggers, and the fact that we keep snapping at each other, we keep saying things that we don't feel good about later on. The question is, how do we handle that? And yes, we are going to be talking about that just a little bit later. Now, this is something which you're going to find very, very interesting. And we are moving to the second part, which talks about the type of relationships in our lives. And this is an important one because we need to understand the universe of our relationships. So I want you to imagine that each one of us is at the center. And we all have a universe of relationships which is rotating around us. And every single day, we are interacting with those relationships, we are giving, we are taking. And there is constant interactions which are going on. So the important part is to understand what are these types of relationships that we have in our life. We are going to give you a visual that helps you understand this.
I completely love this. Yeah, these are 3 concentric circles. And I think this visual is very powerful because right at the center of the entire universe lies one person, and that is self.
So right at the center is you. And this is the person, which is you, that's developing relationships all the time. Because remember, as people, we need people. We are not meant to be in isolation. So we end up creating relationships around us. Now, there are some we choose to have in our lives, and there are some which have come to us by default. So it could have come through family, it could have come through work, it could have come through various different ways in which they get attached to us and we are dealing with them. Either we are born into those families, so set of parents, for example, siblings, so on and so forth. Yes, for some people, it could also be the spouse whom you have met in an arranged marriage circumstance, and then you've really learned to build over it. So the center of it, everything is you. Now, what we want you to see is that the second part talks about the inner circle of relationships that you have in your life?
So the inner circle of people are those people whom I feel extremely close to. They are the people whom I interact a lot more with. Some of these inner circle people could be by choice. So, say, for example, my friends, people whom I have a lot of connection, a lot of interaction with. And some of these also could be default. So, for example, the family that I'm born in. Sometimes these family members by default are a part of your inner circle.
Absolutely. So, inner circle are people whom I interact with regularly. They are close relationships. We end up having deeper connections with people in the inner circle. Also, remember, we experience higher level of vulnerability in those inner circle of relationships, which means that our chances of being hurt by those people who are in the inner circle of our relationships is also very, very high. Now, you know, the inner circle of relationships for some people could be large.
Yeah.
For some people, it could be small. It could be just a couple of people, relationships which are very, very close, which you're very connected with, and they form your inner group. So everybody is different, your personality is different, and therefore the size of your inner circle might also change.
Then we have the last part, which is the outer circle. Now, the outer circle are those people whom we have very limited interaction with. They are a part of us. They still are people whom we interact with, but the interaction with them is lesser. These are the people who at times we may not meet very regularly,
Yes.
or sometimes they could be close family members. Because we are not comfortable with them, we push them from the inner circle to the outer circle.
That's very beautifully said. So outer circle could be people who could be friends, extended family,
acquaintances,
absolutely, colleagues, people whom we interact with, but we may not be deeply connected with. Therefore, our emotional investment in those relationships is limited. So while they may affect us, they may not affect us in a very, very significant way. So it's almost like we are able to get over those upsets much more quickly as compared to our inner circle of relationships. Now, also the outer circle for different people could be of different size. And for some people, they could have a huge range of outer circle of people whom they interact with on a social level, on a little bit of a superficial level, and have some people who are close to them and whom they connect with on regular basis. For some other people, it could be the other way around, that the outer circle is pretty large, or rather the inner circle is pretty large, and the outer circle is of limited people.
We would love to hear from you in the chat box. Which of your circles are larger? Is it the outer circle or is it the inner circle? The fact of the matter is that the inner circle has a tendency to cause more hurt, more upset, and sometimes a lot more conflicts than the outer circle.
It's a good idea to ask ourselves that what exactly, when we talk about challenging relationships or difficult relationships in our life, which of those relationships are we really, really talking about? And the most important person at the center is self. So, what is our relationship with the most important person, which is ourselves? Now, I'm going to ask you an important question. So, when you take a moment to reflect on this inner circle of people, think about all of those people who are a part of this inner circle in your life right now. Who are these people? And now it's a good time to ask yourself these two questions. And the question is, who are these people in my inner circle? And most importantly, what are the quality of my relationships in those inner circle? Are these relationships a source of joy? Are they fulfilling? Do they give me a sense of support? Do I feel understood? Do I feel heard? Do I feel like I trust them? Or are there people in these inner circle who are draining and who are taking up a lot of energy, whom you're trying to manage on every single basis? And remember, just a few hurts in this particular circle, the residue can remain in your body and your mind and your heart for a long, long period of time.
I'm already seeing some answers come in to this, especially these two questions, that who are the people in your inner circle? I can see people write that the number of people are fewer, but those are also the few people who tend to create a lot of hurt. And that's why it tends to be a lot more draining.
You know, what's amazing is that in my experience, when we have worked with people, remember, you have control over things. So there have been some times when people have said that these relationships are so draining that in my mind, I would like to consider them as the outer circle. So it's entirely up to you. Whom are you choosing to keep emotionally in your inner circle? And who are the people whom you're choosing very, very consciously to be connected with, to be probably, fulfill your duty and your responsibility and, interact with on daily basis, but they need not have that kind of emotional impact over you. So being able to see what is it that's happening in your inner circle of people. So while these may be people you interact with on daily basis, it's entirely up to you the kind of impact and the kind of effect that they have on you. Absolutely. We will talk more about this as we move on.
There are two more questions which have come up here. And one of the questions is, in which aspect can people change? Can I change their nature? And like we said earlier, the fact of the matter is we cannot change people. A lot of times when we try to change people, there are two things that tend to happen. They either resist us, so which means that they will not want to change, or even if they do decide to change, they will resent us, which means that they will be angry, upset, and hold the anger towards us for a long time to come.
So the fact is that I cannot change people until and unless they decide to change. And for people who are writing that, yes, my inner circle of people are draining and they are having an impact, trust me, we completely understand. And we completely know how painful it can be. And at the same time, we know that we also have the power to be able to shift the way our inner life is going to be. Let's talk a little bit more. So we are going to take you to an important person here, which is at the center, that is self. You know, every single relationship in our life is secondary to the most important relationship, which is the one that we have with ourselves. When that is filled with a sense of love and trust and joy, the impact that external relationships have on the self is much, much lesser. So the relationship that we need to invest the most in is self. And if you see what we had drawn, the circles that you saw in the earlier slide, the self has a wonderful boundary which is around it. And after that, the inner circle and the outer circle of relationships begin. What does that mean? It means that do we have a good emotional boundary around us that allows us to protect ourselves emotionally? So which means that while we are close to these people, they cannot get so entangled and so enmeshed with us that we tend to get affected in a very, very deep way. So to our relationships and us, we need to be two separate people. And as people, we need to have good boundaries around us where we allow hurt or we allow pain to happen only where we choose to feel it, and not because other people are by default having an impact on us, which is where the boundary around the self is very important. So a good question to ask yourself is, do I have a good emotional boundary between myself and the relationships around me? Or are the relationships so close that they end up affecting me all the time, every single time? It means that the boundaries of my own self-protection are not very strong. Yeah, so keep writing in as thoughts come to you, and even on a writing pad when you're able to get some insights from this. Let's move on to the third part of it. And I simply love this, because this talks about what are the quality of relationships that you have in your life. It's a wonderful question, isn't it? And we are going to use the relationship grid to help you understand the quality of your relationships in your life right now. And if you have a pen and a pad, write this down. It's going to be very useful.
We also have a couple of questions which have come in, and we will be answering them as we are going through the day. Not the day exactly, but going through the hour.
Yeah.
So talking about the relationship grid, I completely love this. For people for whom math was a little difficult, please don't get scared when you look at something like that. It's very, very easy. And I'm going to really explain this to you very quickly. So we have two extreme ends. Yeah. The first one talks about positive. So these are the relationships where I feel positive. These are the relationships where I feel pleasant. The second one, which is the complete opposite to that, talks about the relationships which make me feel negative, the relationships which are not so pleasant.
Now, remember, it's not about positive people or negative people. It's
Absolutely.
not about that.
Absolutely.
It's about whether set of relationships make you feel pleasant or make you feel unpleasant, make you feel good or make you feel bad, make you feel happy or make you feel uncomfortable. So that's what we are trying to say, pleasant, unpleasant.
Absolutely. We have the other axis, yeah, for all the math wizards out there. We have the other axis where we have two dimensions. One talks about adding value, and the other one talks about not adding value. When I say adding value, we mean those relationships which are adding value to us as people, which are adding value to our lives. And when I say they do not add value, it simply means that their contribution to our life is negligible.
So value also means that they add meaning, they are fulfilling, they contribute. So the word is that they contribute in a significant
Absolutely.
way to our lives. Now let's look at, you can actually plot all your relationships in your life on these particular four quadrants, yeah, or sections that we can talk about almost every single relationship
and
of your
think
life.
This is so eye-opening for me, because when I did this, it actually gave me a sense of where exactly do the relationships of my life lie. So let's look at the first quadrant. Yeah. So I'm going to begin with the first quadrant, and Sneha will take the second. The first quadrant talks about those relationships where I feel positive, which means they make me feel pleasant, but they do not contribute to me. They do not add value. And we call these relationships a distraction.
So what happens with those relationships is that you end up having a lot of fun. So it could be somebody whom you meet and you laugh and you've gone out and you've had a good time. You end up feeling good. But the feeling good is short term.
Absolutely.
It serves as a distraction. But this relationship may not necessarily contribute to the overall well-being and growth of you as a person. So they are wonderful to get distracted for a little bit period of time.
The second quadrant, I think this is so powerful, and I think some of you have also answered that in the chat. These are those relationships which do not add value to my life, and they are also not pleasant. We call these relationships the dead or the drain relationships. So they feel like dead weight, and they also tend to drain me out of my energy.
So these are the relationships which don't feel good. They are not pleasant. They are not making me happy. And neither are they contributing to my life. Now, usually a lot of these relationships could be the ones that are not by choice. They have, or it could be people whom you have chosen initially, but over a period of time, the relationship has deteriorated so much that it's become a source of drain. It has become a burden or a weight that you're carrying around you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So while one is a distraction, the other could be dead or drain. Let's look at the third quadrant.
So the third one is very interesting. These are the ones who are adding value to my life. They are contributing to my life, but they are not necessarily pleasant. And these are what we call as relationships which help us learn important life lessons. The life lessons are not easy because they are not so pleasant, but they are making sure that they are contributing to our life.
So usually these could be people, it could even be friends who are able to show the mirror to you, who are able to say, is this who you really are as a person? It may not necessarily be very easy. It could be a mentor. It could be anybody who is probably challenging you and stretching you in certain ways. But at the end of the day, because of those relationships, you are evolving and growing. It could also be some kind of bosses. So these bosses, while they may be very, very difficult to deal with, they are challenging you on daily basis, but they are also helping you get in touch with capabilities that you did not even know exist within you.
Sometimes this role can be played by a parent, it can be by a spouse,
Child as well.
a child as well, where the experiences tend to contribute, but they are not pleasant. The last one, and I think these are the relationships which are an absolute source of joy. These are the relationships which make us feel happy, which make us feel pleasant, and they also add value. We call them the relationships which empower us and which also energize us.
This is the most powerful quadrant. So these are those relationships which feel good, which bring a lot of happiness, and they are also the ones who add tremendous value to our lives. Now, when we decide, when we choose relationships in our life and we invest in them, a good question to ask ourselves right now is, what are the kind of relationships we are investing our energy in? Now, look at this quadrant, and if you had to plot the relationships of your life around these quadrants, where would be the maximum relationships? And what is it that you would like to change about the relationships that you are really
Absolutely.
investing your energy in?
Especially look at your inner circle. Yeah, the inner circle of your relationships. Where do most of them lie? Are these the relationships which also tend to drain you? Are these the relationships which sometimes are difficult, but they are also adding value to my life? Are these distraction tends to come mostly from the outer circle?
Yes.
And are the inner circle relationships the one which are empowering and energizing, which means they are truly contributing to our life?
You know, sometimes what happens, which is the most vicious loop and the most problematic loop that people get stuck in, is that they end up having a lot of relationships which are around dead and drain. So these are the relationships which are draining their energy, which they are feeling burdened, which are very, very challenging on every single day basis. And then in order to counteract the drain that a person is feeling, they end up having a lot of relationships which are in distraction.
Absolutely.
So most of your relationships then would fall on the left-hand side of the quadrant.
Or when we say left-hand side, the common factor on the left-hand side quadrant is that these relationships do not add value. And we call it like a swinging thing. You know, it moves from being dead to distraction. Then there is so much distraction, we come to the relationship which tends to drain us, and then we go back to the distraction.
You know, a lot of times people ask me, you know, how do I deal with those relationships which are a drain,
which actually has
dead.
Come up like 4 times in the chat right now.
Absolutely, you know, which are so exhausting, which are draining me on every single day basis. And how do I work with those? All that we keep telling people is that, would you be willing to change your focus from these relationships which are draining and which are a weight on you towards those which can empower and energize? The more relationships you are able to create in your life which are empowering and energizing, the lesser effect that the relationships which are draining will have on you. And this is what is the amazing thing about building relationships which feel pleasant, as well as the ones which add a lot of value. And trust me, that is in our control. The quality of our relationships in our life is in our control. You know, what is it going to look like? Today, when you get off the call, it's a good idea to sit down and really plot, what are the relationships in your life looking like? Where do most of the relationships lie? Which quadrant? And how are you feeling about it?
It's a good idea to take a screenshot of this particular slide, because that will allow you to plot it when you are going back after the call gets over.
Can we really change a draining relationship? May or may not. The question is, what will be required to change it? Does it require the other person to change? Might not happen. Does it require the situation to change? It may not be in your control. So probably the only person who can change is you. And how are you going to change? You're going to change by creating more and more and more of power and positivity. And then your capacity to be able to change these relationships which are burdening and which are draining will turn around. Trust me.
If you look at a visual, if my debt drain quadrant is big, automatically my other three quadrants tend to become small. So my energize is small, my life lessons is small, because the quadrant, I have only so much energy, I have only so much capacity to interact with people. And because my capacity is being eaten by my dead drain relationships, the energize and important life lesson relationships become smaller. Now, if I had to shift focus, this is what Sneha is saying. If I shift focus and if I consciously invest in creating relationships which are empowering and energizing, or also those relationships which are getting me life lessons, chances are that my dead drain quadrant will automatically start shrinking.
Absolutely. And this is a system that we have built at ISRA with so many years of working with different kinds of people and challenging relationships all the time. Yeah?
Before we move to the next part of the presentation, I'm going to quickly look at two questions which have come up. One question says, one question says, what do you mean by emotional boundary? And well, the second actually is a question, but it pretty much answers that. The question is, does creating a strong emotional boundary mean that we stop getting affected or we stop reacting to the opinions expressed or suggestions that come to us to change our behavior from the inner circle?
Absolutely. So I'm going to answer this question. We are going to take it a little backward. Remember, we started with talking about why do we find relationships in our life challenging? And it started with talking about people are different, and that's the beginning point of everything. Then we spoke about the self and the inner and outer circle of relationships in our life. And we told you that it's very, very important for us to have an emotional boundary between the self and these inner circle or outer circle of relationships. Question is, what is an emotional boundary? Yeah. Now, imagine in physical space, even where you are sitting right now. You could be sitting in a room, either at home, office, cafe, wherever it is that you may be. Even in the room that you're sitting, there is a certain boundary that you see around that differentiates this room from any other room. Every single apartment will have a boundary around it. Every single house, a country, every single thing has a boundary. What are these physical boundaries? It means that we decide what comes in and what goes out. And when these boundaries are present, we are able to feel more safe because we are able to take care of what is inside. Emotional boundary is the same thing. It's when we are able to have a kind of a boundary, an emotional boundary around us that decides what comes in and what goes out, what we choose to get affected, what we choose to not get affected. It's what we say yes to and what we say no to. Some of us are blessed with being raised in a way where we were taught how to keep good emotional boundaries, how to be able to say no, what to choose not to get affected with. But some of us may have not understood boundaries very easily. And we may have spent a lot of time pleasing people and connecting with people and really allowing them to merge with us and get into our inner space. And which means that we need to now learn how to create our own emotional boundaries. And we will be creating another webinar on how do you create strong and healthy emotional boundaries. So please stay tuned. We will be talking more about this very, very soon. The question is, do we need to do two things, self-talk and the conversation model, so that we can quickly put into the flow? Is that right? I am not really certain about what you're saying. I would love to know a little bit more so that we can answer that. So this is the answer to the emotional boundaries part of it. We have also spoken about the quality of relationships and where is it that they lie on this particular grid. If you had to give a percentage, where 100% was your total relationships in your life, how much percentage of this would be dead and drained in your life right now? Is it 30%, 40%, or is it 70%, or maybe 10%? What does it look like? How much percentage of relationships are in distraction? How much are in the ones where you have to learn important life lessons? And lastly, what is the percentage in empower and energize? Trust me, this needs to be at least your 50%, if not more. So it's a good thing to ask yourself that question right now. And with that, we are going to then move to the most important thing, which says, okay, so what are the 4 expert strategies to managing difficult relationships?
Some of you have also asked us the question that my spouse doesn't agree with this, especially with kids. My spouse doesn't agree with something else, or I have a problem with my mother-in-law. I'm seeing that happening on the chat here. The beauty is that these 4 strategies that we are going to be talking about now actually are the ones which will help you in working with all different possible relationships.
The strategies are interlinked and they start with just 3 words, 3 or 4 words. Initially, when you see it, you say, oh, that looks very simple. But trust me, practicing this, I love the word practice because it's almost like a lifelong practice. Every single time, reminding yourself that these are the things that are actually going to help you manage yourself as well as manage other people when you are going through challenging moments. So let's look at what does the first strategy look like, and that's the basic point of everything. Yeah. The first strategy says that accept people are different. So in the first one, we told you people are different. But the challenge here is that it is not easy to accept that people are different, that they may not be the way I want them to be. Yes, it would be wonderful to have greater understanding. It would be wonderful to have better conversation. It would be great to have more support. It would be wonderful to have honest, trusting, open relationships. But the fact of the matter is that people cannot be changed. So it's wonderful when I don't spend energy trying to keep asking the question, why are people like that? A lot of our energy on daily basis goes in trying to figure out why are people behaving the way they are behaving constantly, all the time. We are constantly asking those questions. The fact of the matter is that people have different temperaments, they have different ways of thinking, they have different life experiences, they have different needs, different expectations, different reactions to every single thing that's happening around them. So we would say that instead of asking the question, why are people like that, and struggling desperately to find answers to those questions, which sometimes you may not even find an answer to. The beginning point is to stop all of that struggle within and to be able to understand and accept that people are different. Pretty much more than 50% of the universe is going to be entirely different than you.
We do a lot of workshops, whether it's the Heal Your Life or the Psychogeometrics workshop, and it keeps talking about the fact that people are different. They have different personalities. They have different ways in which they react to conflicts. They have different ways in which they handle emotions. They have different ways in which they deal with stress. And because they are different, that they tend to become the reason for creating issues, and it tends to become the reason for a lot of hurt.
The thing is that accept that people are different. What that does is that when we are not accepting, we end up creating a lot of resistance. We are pushing and pushing and pushing, trying to find answers, and we are trying to talk, to figure it all out. When we are resisting, it's extremely draining. The minute we accept, we release the resistance and we actually move into a flow where we say, yes, people are different, which means that they may not be the way I want them to be. And instead of feeling a lot of helplessness and anger, I end up feeling an emotion of compassion and of letting go that people may not be the way I want them to be.
I have realized that when I say people are different and why are they different? Why are they different? Why are they like that? A lot of our energy is spent in just trying to figure out why are they different. But now that we know they are different, now that we accept that they are different, we are able to apply the same energy into other areas to be able to create better conversations with them.
It's a wonderful question. Does that mean that we are resigned? Does it come from a space where it says that, I accept, I can't do anything, and I'm so helpless? That's not a powerful position at all. When we say accept, it comes from a wonderful emotional awareness saying that people are not like me. Trust me, there are enough psychological instruments in the world to tell you that people are different, and therefore they are going to react extremely differently, and they will have different needs and different expectations as compared to you. So stop fighting these differences and learn to get into a mode of a more powerful acceptance of what these differences are. And yes, there are some people you will connect to well, and there are some people you may not connect to, and that's a part of the whole thing. Strategy number 2, very, very important. Once I accept people the way they are, I don't try to change or fix them. Yeah, so I don't spend my energy either. You know what? I have had a lot of people who say that I need to change this person, and often for their good. The intention is very good, so that we will be better as a family. There will be better relationships in an organization. The outcome will be much better. So while the intention may be good, we end up spending a lot of energy, first of all, talking, explaining, expressing ourselves, and then we at times start yelling, we start withdrawing, we start experiencing all of those emotions because our objective is to try and change people. The fact of the matter is that we can't change anyone. We can only make suggestions and we can make requests. There are times when people either accept that change and they go along with it, and there are times when people don't go along with that change. So the thing for us to do is to stop blocking our energy, that I will be happy only if this person changes. I will be happy only if this situation is fixed. I will be happy only if we have a better conversation. It means that I have blocked my energy, I have blocked my happiness, I have blocked my progress to the other person changing, which means the control has moved from me to now to the other person or the relationship, that when they change, when they are fixed, I'm going to be happy. Yeah, so the idea is to take back control of our life and know that we may not be able to change anyone, and our job is to not to fix people around us. Our job is to be happy and to find everything that creates happiness for us. Strategy number 1 is acceptance, is surrender, knowing that I'm not going to resist people and the fact that they are different. Second is that I'm not going to block my energy, that I will be happy only if people change, because then the control of my life is on in other people's hands. Now the question is that means that if I have to accept them, and if they don't even change, everyday interactions will be filled with a lot of triggers, which is where strategy 3 comes into play. Strategy 3 says, stop taking them personally. It means that often it is not about you at all. People are operating from their own pain bodies. They have their own life experiences, their own challenges, their own insecurities and fears and doubts and everything. And the minute we start taking things personally, we make it difficult. It could be as small as I walk into an organization and I smile at somebody and the person does not smile back at me. I create a whole story in my head that, I'm not, the person is not acknowledging me, is not respecting me, is not really, even I'm smiling and is not even smiling back at me, very, very snobbish. What's the point that you're trying to make? And there is this whole story which is going on in our head about the person. Similar things happen at home, isn't it? Somebody says something and they just say it out of anger or say it in a way that hurts us, and we end up making it all about ourselves, that I have been said this and it is about me. And then we start thinking and overthinking and creating a whole story around it. It's not what people do to us that creates the pain. but it's the way we think about what people have done is what creates the pain. So today, a good strategy is to not take people personally and say it's not about me. Everybody is operating from their own pain, from their own life experiences, and I refuse to make it my story. And the minute you don't take it personally, it gives you tremendous amount of power. The fourth strategy that we are talking about today is invest a lot of time and practice great amount of self-care. So while you're dealing with challenging relationships, know that they are going to be exhausting. They are going to be draining. There are times when we cannot even influence. They are just a part of our life. We cannot do anything but have to interact with them on daily basis. So, it's like an emotional balance. Imagine, what do you call a scale, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's like a scale. So every time the weight of a relationship pulls you down, what is it that you're doing to invest in your own self-care? What's the deposit that you're making in your emotional bank balance, your own well-being? So can you do things in a day that helps you make you feel better about yourself? It could be taking care of your body. It could be eating food that nourishes you. It could be going out and meeting friends which are important. It could be going down for a walk, reading a good book that inspires you and helps you and keeps you on track. It could be a pet. It could be anything that gives you a sense of good feeling. So how much are you investing in taking care of yourself? Because the minute you take care of yourself, all the other things start to affect you lot lesser. Yeah, so instead of fighting those difficult relationships and managing those challenging relationships and spending a lot of energy there, it's also a good idea to look at how much energy are you investing, because that is what you're spending. So how much are you investing in really taking care of yourself? Because otherwise you're bound to be burnt out. So the fourth strategy is, very quickly as a recap, number one strategy is accept people are different. Just accept it, don't fight it. Strategy number two.
Don't try to change them or fix them. Strategy number 3, stop taking them personally. And like I see a comment here, yes, when you do take them personally, there is a chance of you feeling rejected simply because you know it's like an attack on you.
Nobody has the power to reject you, trust me, unless you choose to give them that. So if I choose not to take it personally, the power remains right within you and in your control.
And the last one, practice great amount of self-care. What is the one thing that you would like to do today to ensure that you are able to take care of yourself?
There are a lot of workshops, lot of possibilities, lot of wonderful coaches who are out there. They can be a great support. There are Heal Your Life programs. There are Heal Your Life coaches. So please make it a point to reach out, because these people know how to support you, how to be able to give you space that helps you love yourself even more.
I love the question that Louise here talks about, and that's something which it always touches me. And she says, when you wake up in the morning, look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what can I do to make you happy today?
Absolutely, that's the most important question, isn't it? So reach out to people who can support you. And with that, we've come to the end of 1 hour. We have loved talking to you. And for everybody who wants to get into the space of transformation and wants to do workshops and coaching for other people whom you would like to uplift and change and transform, remember, at ISRA, we are running our Psychogeometrics Train the Trainer program. This is a wonderful system. It's an internationally validated instrument which actually teaches you how people are different. And it actually tells you what are the various kinds of people in the world around you, and how is it that you can manage them in a much better way. This system can be used for team building, leadership, conflicts, parenting, relationships, anything at all. It's a very powerful system. It's on the 22nd to 26th of January 2020. We have it only once in a year. We know that it's going to change your entire profession in a very, very big way.
I'm going to also jump in and talk about the fact that we have a 2-day Heal Your Life workshop happening this weekend. And we also have a 2-day psychogeometrics workshop happening in Dubai in February.
So please join us, and please join other Heal Your Life teachers as well whenever that you can. Remember, you have wonderful support system. All that you need to do is reach out. Please connect with us on Facebook, on Instagram, and we keep putting in videos, small little nuggets of insights which can help you. You never know what information comes to you at the right time.
We've tried our best to answer all the questions that are available, that were asked here. And if we did miss out a question, we really apologize for that. We would love to hear from you over email. So feel free to write to us and we will try to get back to you at the earliest.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And remember, the power is within you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Bye.